where to produce, when, if there is droughts or floods. We address all of that through the technicians and experts from the experts. They work with the countries, and they also engage university partners from the countries themselves. And so what would we would like to achieve with this project? Food and nutrition security of the family farmers and their families, and also the students. So when you work with intercrop, with side crops, and you make use of cotton byproducts, you provide food to the families, and also you provide products to be sold. Because as the farmer produce cotton and food, and with the surplus, the farmer can sell the surplus to the open market or to the private market, to the public market. So there is some income diversification in this system integrated with cotton production, which reduces economic vulnerability. So what are the regional results? We have, in terms of best practices, we systematized at least 2 good practices involved intercropping cotton with food crops. We produced a lot of materials, policy briefs, producing food besides cotton in international market. We also had an exchange in the Cotton Week and the World Cotton Week with the Brazilian Cotton Congress, where the countries came to Brazil in order to visit the reality of cotton production, intercropped with cotton growing, and to see what was more recent. And technology and communication was developed in order to provide trackability and commercialization of products grown with cotton, in addition to communication, reinforcing that cotton should be used as a vector for regional development. And in terms of beneficiaries, and we haven't finished the project in Mozambique nor in Benin, but we have more than 11,000 farmers, directly or indirectly, who benefited from the project. More than 40 capacity building activities and best practices of growing cotton, more than 70 technicians that are being trained, and more than 110 cooks who participated in cooking workshops. Here in the nutritional evaluation, you can see Vaniri, Professor Vaniri, with the children of farmers and students in Tanzania. She was doing the nutritional semiology, and we have here a cook, and we're talking to her about the menu, what is the actual, the idea and ideal and desired menu. And we also work with food and nutrition security with the students, because we understand that the kids are the seeds for the future. Agricultural best practices, you can see a machine that it's a moto cultivator that we have bought so that the farmers could use it in their machambas, which means that they reduce from 14 days to 2 hours. With these moto cultivators, stay with the cooperative associations, and it provides uniformity of spacing, which was shown by the professors, so that you would not lose yields by the professors. Here, in terms of market and income, we have a professor who went to Tanzania to make a manual weaving machine so that the farmers themselves could manufacture their own clothing. And in terms of impacts and sustainable impacts and results, we know that intercropping cotton with food crops and using and commercializing cotton byproducts. The access to institutional markets are clear examples of how the pressure made a bridge between cotton food production and strengthening of local food systems. The integration with the nutrition agenda through education in the cotton growing areas completes this cycle, which ensures that cotton remains to be not only a source of income, but also a leverage for the social and nutritional development of the farming families. And to finish, together, we continue to weave the threads of cooperation and dialogue and exchange of experience between the countries of the Global South, following paths of development, dignity, transformation for communities that feed the world. So that's our message, and thank you very much to everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you very much, Albanete Peixinho, for the rich contextualization, for telling the story of the important initiative. So now we're going to move on to the block of international experiences. Now we're going to hear the representatives of the cooperating Brazilian institutions from the federal universities who work in the partner countries. First, I invite Professor Rafael Peron from the University of Lavras to share the experience with Mozambique within the Beyond Cotton project. Professor Rafael Peron is an agronomist, a doctor, professor of the Federal University of Lavras, and works in the areas of public policies for family farming, territorial sustainable development, and food and nutrition security. Given its solid experience in international cooperation with an emphasis in public procurement and production inclusion, he works actively in the actions of the Beyond Cotton project, supporting actions for the strengthening of international markets in partner countries in Africa. Professor Rafael, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone who are in Brazil and all of us who are from Mozambique. Just a small correction. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Just a quick correction. My background was in, I have a graduation degree in the University of Lavras, but I also studied in the University of Rio Grande do Norte, and now I work at the Federal University of Lavras at the Division of Agrarian Sciences of Lavras. I would like to thank for the opportunity to be part of this webinar and to talk about this beautiful country, which is the Beyond Cotton project. And I would like to start by talking about my institution, about the Federal University of Lavras, which projected to the world persons of the importance of Alfredo Chais Lopes, which you can see on the left, our dear Alfredo, who was responsible for breaking the barrier of the Midwest of Brazil, which was the new agricultural border, the frontier, and which is now resulted in this new agricultural frontiers. I'd like to thank Professor Mario from the Federal University of Barreiras in Bahia, and recognize here in this moment for the contribution of the Federal University of Lavras to the Brazilian agriculture, which we recognize now as the bread basket of the world. And this plays an important role. And we also have a great contribution of Professor Arinelli, who was the director of the then ESAL, and before the creation of UFLA, and one of the people behind the creation of Embrapa, the Brazilian Enterprise for Agricultural Research, and which was responsible for allowing Brazil to master the natural resources and develop terms of agriculture. And with the projection of UFLA to the contribution and to the South-South cooperation and to the contribution to the South-South cooperation, I would like to highlight the role of these two professors who you were seeing on your screen. Professor Antônio Carlos Fragas, now retired, and who retired recently, and who was a professor of the cotton crop in UFLA, and Professor Pedro Castro Neto, who still teaches in the agriculture engineering department. These two professors from UFLA, they have participated very actively in South-South cooperation projects, which have derived from the cotton dispute. So there has been almost more than a decade of partnership between UFLA and ABC. So it's important to recognize the role of these two professors, through whom I extend my greetings to all the civil servants to contribute to this technology transfer from Brazil to our African partners. Together, they have coordinated 8 projects in countries such as Kenya, Burundi, Tanzania, Cameroon, Senegal, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and also in Mozambique, and have received from our university to provide long courses, like 3-month-long courses, students from 18 countries who speak Portuguese, French, and English. And all of the coordination provided by these professors was extremely efficient in this transfer of technology, providing for the possibility of bringing the African technicians and the creation of the Center for the Dissemination of Technology in Catuti, Seditac. And the strengthening of this center is the result of the articulation provided by these two professors who had an almost exclusive dedication to cooperation with Africa in the last 10 years, many times to the detriment to their own lines of research. And it's important to mention this because we understand that the technical participation of the universities is an extension activity. We're talking about university extension, about rural extension, and more recently this year, the Directorate of International Relations, or UFLA, has began to get involved with these projects, but the diplomacy is always made through the Brazilian Cooperation Agency with a lot of competence. And the role of the technicians is the role of the transfer of technologies, and this recognition is important for the new generations of collaborators to be able to, through what was done in the last few years, to maintain the excellence of these projects. Professor Antônio Carlos Fraga has kindly been with me in my first mission to Mozambique in 2022.
So in this initiative of the Beyond Cotton project in Mozambique, that counts on the participation of the experts of WFP Center of Excellence, nutritionists such as Mrs. Albanese Peixinho, that coordinates the Beyond Cotton project, and also Marisete Araújo, who is our focal point on nutrition in Mozambique. And in the agronomy field, we have a group of agronomists like Dr. Elvira Rendição that has always accompanied us in the activities in Maputo and also in the other provinces of Mozambique. Had the pandemics during the project implementation, and a very successful solution that we had, especially because of the pandemics, was to include higher education institution, which is the Superior Institute of the Manica province in Mozambique, who could lead the extension or the outreach activities in Mozambique during the pandemics in 2020 and 2021. And also in Mozambique, we also have a SIDAI, which is the Service for Economic Activities at the district level. And it's similar, or it's a counterpart, we would say, of the Rural Extension Agency of Brazil, EMATER. And also we had another institution, which is IAON, which is the Institute of Oilseed and Cotton of Mozambique, who participated in the project in the regions of Tete and Manica. Like Albanese has already mentioned, this project is very special because it has two lines of work. It joins agricultural practices with nutritional practices. So when we talk about countries like Mozambique, and we have as the main axe the cotton crop, we have to bear in mind food security, because we need to end hunger. People who are hungry don't have time. They need to solve this problem. So the wisdom of having the cotton crops with food crops was indeed a very successful or very important aspect of this project. And here in UFLA, we have the participation of our Department of Agriculture and also our Department of Nutrition. Professor Carolina Chagas has coordinated the project at the very beginning in 2017. And in the field of agriculture, our idea was to train trainers, so to build the capacity of technicians that could give a long-lasting characteristic of this project, because the project has a validity, has an expiration date, so to speak. So it is important for us that these initiatives can be project is concluded. So when we decided what to do and how to do this throughout the project, we have identified the problems, and we have developed courses for the agronomous engineering students at ISPM, and also the municipal staff, because we noticed that the rural extension services still need to be improved in Mozambique. So the number of extension agencies in the relation to the number of farmers is still very low. So we need to form new rural extension agents in Mozambique. So we have identified the main problems, and we noticed that there wasn't such a thing as the use of fertilizers, whether biological or organic fertilizers, or there wasn't a calendar for integrated pest management. We also the full utilization of cotton, because it's important to understand that we can have the full utilization of cotton, this fiber can be used for food, because the seed cotton in Brazil is very important for animal feed. Cotton oil can also be used to make soap or biofuel, and we still have the biomass of cotton that can be used in animal feed, so which is indirectly used also in human feeding. So we talked about the influence of El Niño and best practices that help us cope with these climatic situations. And after all these technical components, we developed guides with best agricultural practices for example, to fight pests and diseases using resistant plants that are already, such as tobacco, that are used for integrated crop management. And after doing this technical leverage, we started talking about the longevity of, so that we could promote economic sovereignty for the population. So they had to organize themselves. The agriculture in general terms, not only cotton crops, but they are usually carried out by family farmers. So here in Brazil, the cotton crops have 1,000, 2,000 hectares, but in Mozambique, the farmers usually have 1 to 5 hectares. So they have to be capable of meeting their needs. So that's why they have to organize themselves. So we carried out courses on farmers associations and cooperatives. We taught them what is a general assembly, what are the characters or the actors that need to be there to have a cooperative. And we talked about the Center for Technology Dissemination in Catuti was very important, because in that region of Brazil, in Catuti, cotton farmers can relate better to the situation of Mozambican cotton farmers. And we carried out rural extension services. We taught those trainers on how they could share the knowledge with local farmers, speaking the dialect or the local language, using an accessible language that could be understood by the family farmers. So we had over 10 to approximately that responded to 11 out of the 17 goals. Professor, you only have 1 minute to conclude your speech. Okay. So the methodology of work, the work methodology, we had courses, site visits to agricultural infrastructure, and development center, a demonstration unit where they could see the techniques. The main challenges that we have identified, we have here a picture of one of our plots, which was close to the farms. And one of the main challenges was the fact that the farmers didn't have they planted in line, and here we could see that once they organized in cooperatives, Coma Kiri Mutaka, which is the wealth is in the land, this was the name they gave to the cooperative, and the technicians carried out they presented the solutions. And here in the last video, we are seeing the community leader teaching on dancing how the farmers could plant, that they should plant in lines, that the sowing had to be in lines. So this shows how the community has the ownership of the scientific knowledge. And so this was how we could see an increase in yields, not only in cotton crops, but also in sorghum and beans and maize. And so this is what I would like to share. I hope I have kept track of time, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you, Professor Rafael, for sharing us all that took place in Mozambique. So now I would like to invite Professor Mário Alberto dos Santos from UFOB, who's going to talk about the experience we had with Benin. Mário Alberto is a professor at the Federal University of the Western Region of Bahia State. He works with rural extension services, territorial development, and family farming. He has a broad experience in public policies in food and nutritional security, focusing on improving local productive systems. He has worked in the Beyond Cotton project, contributing to South-South cooperation, especially in strengthening the strategy of access to markets. Professor Mario, you have the floor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation of participating in this event and would like to participate. These moments are extremely important, and I would also like to thank you all for being here. Since there are many people and many institutions, I'm going to talk. So I have some slides to show you or to summarize the activities that we carried out in Benin. We had 3 workshops in 2023. In these 3 workshops, we had practical or hands-on activities to exchange knowledge and experiences, and we chose to work in Benin with the premises of what we call in Brazil of a syntropic agriculture, which has as a model or as a set of practices and principles what we are calling agroecological agroforestry systems. So we gather a set of management practices and knowledges, and here in Brazil, we are calling these agroecological agroforestry systems. In this sense, since the project in Benin is my first international cooperation experience, which makes me very honored and glad, the first strategy was to use some of the rural diagnostic tools, which are very common in Brazil, and these tools had the purpose of making some initial information available, which I understood that would be useful for the activities that we wanted to implement. And during this process, I used the SWOT tool, which is widely used in Brazil, which is the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats, and the agricultural calendar. So we gathered some information from the local agriculture in Benin and the weaknesses of the family farmers, the vulnerabilities that they had, and at the same time, the crop management techniques that they were using. So we understood that we had some opportunities to work and also a group of threats that need to be overcome. And we had to be aware of all these factors. And during our discussions, we also had dialogues with the families so that we could understand on site the activities, to understand the characteristics and the planting characteristics, the soil characteristics, what kind of tools that they had available, the choice of the crops, what were the crops that those families were familiar with. So to come up with a strategy that would meet the needs of the participating family. So this initial dialogue was extremely important. And our proposal of activity to intervene, we had a first experimental plot. In Benin, they call this field schools, but it's an experimental unit, an experimental plot that uses different management practices that are common in agroforestry and agroecology. And the families highlighted, and we paid close attention to that, which is soil recovery, with the soil restoration. With the families we have worked with, it was not common in the families to have this soil restoration or soil conservation practices. So when we were doing the SWOT tool, when we were getting the information, it was very noticeable to us that the soil was in poor condition, so we need to have soil restoration. We have this problem also in Brazil, and we have a set of knowledges and techniques and technology that we use for soil restoration and soil conservation. So with this, we could have a significant impact in the production conditions of the families and also on the costs of this agriculture. So we focused on this soil recovery and conservation, and using species that were present in the countries and species that the families already know and they are familiar with and that are useful for soil restoration and conservation. So we exchanged the knowledge, and it was extremely interesting because the families in Benin, they also have their own sophisticated knowledge in terms of agricultural practices. And when we mix these two knowledges, the knowledge we have in Brazil and the knowledge of the family farmers of Benin, this made it possible for us to have significant advances throughout the process. So here I will share you some pictures of the field school. The slide is not moving forward. You have to switch to the presentation mode. In the first slides, let me check. Now can you see? Now, yes. Okay. Okay, so there are some images that you could see before from the area we could see. And in the slide 5, this is the school field. And using this biodiverse system, we had lines of fruit trees that were available, and between lines we have annual crops. And so we used some species.
A gente instalou uma área específica só com a cultura do algodão, consorciada com feijão, né? Então aí, né, aqui nessa área a gente tem várias espécies de algumas culturas anuais, né? Como milho, amendoim e feijão, e também a mandioca e linhas de espécies frutíferas.
And also cassava and some species We had also papaya, guava, if I'm not mistaken, and also coconut tree, and so it was intercropped, and between the rows we had some annual crops. In this other slide, that's the area where we established a trial plot. Some important aspects to mention. In this experimental area, we cleared an area of about 20 by 20 meters, and this area was not being used by the families. It had some spontaneous plants, so we cleared this area in order to carry out an experiment with cotton intercropped with beans, with brown beans. And some interesting things happened because the families managed to observe what was the effect of the coverage of the soil to the development of the plants. So it was clear to the families that it had a more water withholding capacity in the soil, so it could withhold the water even after the rains had finished, and they observed also a good development of the cotton plant. So the image that you are seeing, so far we had not applied any bio input, but then afterwards we had a workshop on the preparation of bio inputs, and in these bio inputs so far had not been used. And following in this discussion proposed by the project, there are 4 points that were mentioned, which is a strategy to access to market. So that's also a challenge for us in Brazil, and we need to think about short circuit strategies for these economies as well. And it's very important to have public policy strategies such as public procurement strategies, especially with school marketplaces, have a circuit of marketplaces and trade shows, and some strategies that we also use in Brazil and which also could be replicated banning, and which can also bring a lot of benefit to the growing families. And when we are working with agroecology and agroforestry, we value the local production because both agroecology and agroforestry, they value the local and knowledge and production. So we also think about what the statement that goes that the food must be grown the closest to where people will eat it. So we have a strategy to value the local production and also to have short circuit commercialization. And also there is an idea of replacing the imports of foods and food imports, so the local production is valued under many aspects. So in relation to the technical capacity building, this is something that is strong in the project. So we gather a set of techniques and technologies that are useful for management and also help in the conservation and restoration of the soil, and also in the process of a biodiverse production, which has a very positive and meaningful impact in terms of food sovereignty, because the end result, you have a higher diversity of products when you have a biodiverse system. So this is something that's very meaningful. And the 4th point, which is the construction of sustainable solutions and adequate to the local solution, also have a strong relation with the idea of agroforestry and agroecology, because they follow principles and practices of agriculture, which are based on nature, as when we are thinking of the design of the production system, and also for the practices for that in terms of the management that is going to be applied. So we have suitability to the context of Beni when we use these strategies and the knowledges that Brazil has gathered in terms of knowledge of agroecology. So you have 2 more minutes, please. Okay, I'm about to finish. So I just brought a few examples here to show some experiences of Brazil, which are experiences that we develop in the Western Bahia, which are the experiences that allow us to have knowledge that we can then share through South-South cooperation and also improve the work that we do technically in this process of South-South technical cooperation. So there are some activities that we carry out. We had 2 projects that were approved last year that are beginning, and all of them involve these issues that I am sharing with you. So these are some images in the municipality of Teridere. These are biodiverse production systems. We have some production of seedlings with the preparation of the seed beds and also for horticultural crops. And this is an area that was developed in 3 months. We took an area that was in a deteriorated situation, and then we established the system, and development was very interesting. So just to wrap up, I would like very much to thank you for the opportunity. It is very special to be able to participate in this project. I hope that it continues. Hope that we're going to have more activities and more phases. And I think that more important of it all is to consider that the agroforest and agroecological system provides an abundance of light, and this for food and nutritional security and sovereignty is very important. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to the dialogue and for any questions. Over. Thank you very much, Professor Mario, of this very rich explanation of the project in Beni. I'd like to invite Professor Luderlandio Andrade from the Federal University of Campina Grande to talk a little bit about the actions of the project in Tanzania. Luderlandio is from the University of Campina Grande, a doctor in agricultural engineering, with a focus on engineering, and he works in topics related to irrigated agriculture, management of natural resources, and strengthening of family farming. And he also participates in technical cooperation activities within the Beyond Cotton project with a focus on support of policies for public procurement and rural sustainable development. Professor Luderlandio, you have the floor.
Para mim está sem áudio.
Nós não estamos ouvindo.
We can't hear you. You're muted.
Ainda não. Ainda não conseguimos ouvi-lo. Vamos aguardar um pouquinho.
Agora tá me ouvindo, Paulo?
Agora
Can you hear me
sim.
now, Paula? Yes. It was the mic of the phone. Okay. So, good morning, Good afternoon and good evening to everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having the opportunity to talk on behalf of the FCG, ABC, of the Center of Excellence, and the IBA, who have sponsored the project. I didn't make a presentation because my statement, more than a technical, it's more of a passionate declaration in relation to cooperation. I asked Anna to place a image that I would like her to place there. In the Beyond Cotton project in Tanzania, we had some nuances that were seen by us in the initial project, and we changed what we were supposed to do initially, because when we talk about zero tillage, about best agricultural practices, but there were a few things that if you don't have initially, you can do these practices, which is water. When you need to know that not everywhere you have, every place has a different specificity. When we got to Tanzania, and as soon as we began to visit the schools, we could see that there was no water. How can I tell someone to sow properly if there were no water for consumption? And when there was water available, there was no quality. And then we began to think amongst ourselves, the technicians from UFCG and together with ABC, and try to do something different in this project. And then the idea came up, which was to build cistern, to build water tanks, and we tried to manage the government of Tanzania that it would be more feasible than buy a few machines, would be to buy some water tanks and agricultural plant beds. And then we managed to convince and buy a few water tanks, because we saw that the kids would walk 3 kilometers to get water. And then we saw, how are we going to work with cotton oil seed, with cotton pie, if people have no water? And throughout the project, we managed to build these water tanks. And something else that we noticed in the project in Tanzania was that the spacing, as the professors mentioned, the issue of pest management control, they don't have much assistance like in the Northeast. A few years ago, we had the same condition. We had no water and we had no access to information in terms of technical assistance. We saw the technical assistance is critical for the development of a water, of a region with a little knowledge. Something else was that throughout the project, I could see that with the cooperation, for cooperation to work, we need passion. You need to be immersed. The people who are bringing knowledge, they have to be involved. And I have some suggestions to give to a few projects, which is related to the view of the farmer, of the person who's receiving, what they need. And then, of course, there is a part that is diplomatic. We have to interact with the organizations, but we need to have a deeper feel of the problem. As I said, in Tanzania, cleaner water, but people are able to receive the information. We could see that we could deepen in topics such as seed storage area. By talking to the farmers, we noticed that the market needs to introduce, just like here in Brazil, so they have to introduce seeds that need a better technological package. We try to incentivize them to preserve the Creole seeds, because Africa is a cradle of the seeds. So the seeds that we developed in the Northeast, we make an effort to store these seeds. So we managed to create economical crops with a little consumption of water. And something else that we noticed was that on the ground, people are avid for knowledge. It's not enough to form the technicians, but also get into the community and see how things work. Their reality, we noticed with the project of Tanzania, with little time, with little resources, we're able to do something that, and which will have a domino effect. We could hear from the reports from the folks from Tanzania. The government would buy the water tanks, and also even the driver from WFP would build. So everything is a seed. From one seed, we can get 1 million seeds. And this knowledge can be replicated if we bring basic knowledge that they can share. Ana, I would like to put their picture, which I would like to have that picture in the end of my talk. Well, I am very passionate about what I do, and I was really happy for this invitation. This project in Africa, I had never participated. In the first day of the journey, I understood things as I participated, some things I was happy about, some things I was displeased. But we know that given the global context, our desires, our ideals cannot always be placed. We can take a little bit of our ideals and our place and share with people. A great shock, and I would like to talk about, was when I saw the warehouses in WFP, when I saw a lot of maize, of processed maize and mineral salt. That touched me deep. I was a little bit mad, but it took me back to understand we wouldn't be able to provide a whole meal to everyone in Africa. It would be a dream. It would be the dream solution. But if we are able to get to these people and share knowledge with them, these people will be free and get there. Because the Northeast was able to, the Northeast people before migrated from here. And something that I wanted to suggest in future projects and people who are leading these projects is that we should know better the reality of this place, what these people need to have a deeper knowledge of the location. In Tanzania, for instance, what I would suggest, I would create dams, underground dams, water tanks, cisterns, water catchment, because what they need, even though it's close to the Lake Victoria, but in more remote areas, they have a lot of difficulty to have access to water. And also introduce easy to build things, such as potato things. We noticed that there are things, but one of the things that I knew, I share with them, and a lady who learned our techniques, she said that our technique was difficult, but afterwards it becomes easier and it produces more. Just a simple spacing. Just teach them that where you eat leaves of cassava, you should not eat the roots, because if you don't have roots, you don't have photosynthesis, you cannot have the fruit. These are simple things that if you share with the African communities, of course, when it's closer to the city, agriculture is more developed. But in areas that are more remote, things are more difficult when it comes to agriculture. So in relation to that photography, the guy in the picture is Zacarias. He really wanted to learn, and he learned how to build the water tanks, the ecological plant beds, and everything that I share with them, because they have a great intelligence. I have never seen people who could learn things so easily, so fast as people from Tanzania. I could see that even our language, I learned a few words such as changa, such as tufai, just a few words, but whatever I said, they were repeating very quickly. Seed, sand, everything, the cement. The guy who's much younger than myself, he built the water tanks, the cisterns, the ecological ovens. Another thing that I'm missing is related to the cover crops. We had a situation, there was a lady who said, how can I make this cover crop if I use the maize to build fire to cook? Because they have deforested the regions, they're no longer log, have no other source. And then we built the ecological oven, which I learned that I designed together with Joel, so someone who I admired. He said, okay, let's build an oven. We built an oven, and with this oven, we could save a lot of log, a lot of, it required much less wood. So, because otherwise the oven would consume more wood if it was open like the traditional ones. So this oven allowed the school to have better conditions to prepare food. So a suggestion is that you always consider the schools, always share knowledge with the young people, because it is the young people who will change the reality and who have a different perspective of the world, of the real world. And with the globalization, the internet, the young people are more in tune with things. And I finish my words by thanking everyone and said the cooperation should never stop. Although I had my first international experience, my first experience in cooperation, I have been cooperating since I was born. I've been cooperating my plate with my clothing, with my neighbors, with people from school. I was born and raised sharing things, sharing so that in the end I could add and multiply. If we share our knowledge and we really learn and the reality and we dive into the reality, we can develop something better to the world and make everyone have food and have a dignified life, and which I was able to get thanks to the study and to knowledge. I joined the university at the age of 32. I'm sharing this story and like to congratulate the WFP and also ABC and also the IBA and UFCG for forming people, for believing in people, to Fobi, to Paola.
A todos que se engajam todo dia, tiram momento de suas vidas para dedicar-se ao próximo, porque eu só estou feliz quando o meu vizinho está feliz, quando minha mãe está feliz.
Can only be happy when my neighbor's happy, when my mother's happy, when my neighbor's happy, when my colleagues are happy. So when a colleague from Tanzania calls me in the middle of the night and says, Bibi, 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 I say, Zaka, 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 and it's just like giving him a hug, and we switch off the phone, and this makes me happy, and you can count on my support, on my cooperation, because it was a great honor to participate in this project, and it was a great honor to participate in those moments in Tanzania, in Mozambique, in Kenya, and I sincerely hope that one day we can have the news that no single person is facing hunger in Tanzania or in Africa. And if people open their eyes and stop launching rockets to other planets, we're going to save humankind. because there is a lot of land in Africa. We can do a lot, we can save many lives. Africa has given us a lot, and it can give us more. Thank you, Africa. Thank you, motherland. Thank you all. Sorry for my emotion, but I am very passionate about the subject. Thank you, Professor, for sharing the knowledges and the achievements of cooperation and the Beyond Cotton project in Tanzania. So we are reaching the end of this webinar. Unfortunately, we will not have time for questions, but the project staff will be available to you through email, ana.freitas@wfp.org. So ana.freitas@wfp.org. So those of you who wish to send any questions, so we thank you all very much for your presence. This was the first webinar of the 2025 cycle of the Beyond Cotton project. The full video will be available on the WFP Center of Excellence channel. And then I would like to thank the interpreters who assisted us in organizing this event. We will meet on the second webinar on August 13 at the same time. And the topic will be institutional procurement and access to market by smallholder farmers. And so thank you so much, and I hope to see you in our next session.